provided that there shall be no criminal liability on the part of a person having carnal knowledge of another person under 16 years of age when the age difference between the parties is not more than 3 years, and the sexual act in question is proven to be consensual, non-abusive, and non-exploitative, provided further that if the victim is under 13 years of age, this exception shall not apply. As used in this act, non-abusive shall mean the absence of undue influence, intimidation, fraudulent machinations, coercion, threat, physical, sexual, psychological, or mental injury or maltreatment, either with intention or through neglect, during the conduct of sexual activities with the child victim. On the other hand, non-exploitative shall mean there is no actual or attempted act or acts of unfairly taking advantage of the child's position of vulnerability, differential power, or trust during the conduct of sexual activities. Based on the amended provision, these are the following changes. Number 1. It is now statutory rape to have carnal knowledge of a woman under 16 years of age, whereas before, it is statutory rape to have carnal knowledge of a woman under 12 years of age. So to repeat, the age of consent has been raised from under 12 years of age to under 16 years of age. Take note that in statutory rape, the only subject of inquiry is the age of the woman and whether or not carnal knowledge had taken place. Hence, even if there was no force, threat, or intimidation, or even if the victim was not deprived of reason or otherwise unconscious, or even if the rape was not achieved through fraudulent machination or grave abuse of authority, the crime is still statutory rape. Why? Because the law presumes that the victim does not and cannot have a will of her own on account of her age. For example, X, 45 years old, had sexual intercourse with Y, who is 15 years old. X and Y are sweethearts. Question, is X liable for statutory rape? The answer is yes. The only subject of inquiry is the age of the woman. Here in this example, Y is 15 years of age, and whether carnal knowledge took place. In this example, they had sexual intercourse. So, X is liable for statutory rape. Number 2. But here lies the exception. The person having carnal knowledge of a woman under 16 years of age will not be criminally liable when the age difference between the parties is not more than 3 years, and the sexual act in question is proven to be consensual, non-abusive, and non-exploitative. Let us go through some examples. Example number 1. X, 17 years old, and Y, 15 years old, are sweethearts. Carried away by the situation after finding themselves alone inside X's house, they had sexual intercourse. Assuming X acted with discernment, is he liable for statutory rape? The answer is no. Even if X acted with discernment, X is not criminally liable because his age difference with Y is not more than 3 years. In this example, X is 17 while Y is 15, so they only have a 2-year difference. Moreover, the sexual intercourse was consensual, non-abusive, and non-exploitative. So the example falls within the exception. Please remember that had X not acted with discernment, he would be exempt from criminal liability regardless of the circumstances obtaining. Basis, Section 6 of Republic Act 9344 as amended. Example number 2. X, 14 years old, had sexual intercourse with Y, 13 years of age. Is X liable for statutory rape? What do you think is the answer? The answer is no. Aside from the fact that their age difference is not more than 3 years, X is exempt from criminal liability as provided for under Section 6 of RA 9344 as amended. Why? Because X is still below the age of criminal responsibility. Example number 3. X is 18 years old today and Y is 15 years old also today. If they engage in sexual intercourse today and such sexual activity is consensual, non-abusive, and non-exploitative, is X liable for statutory rape? The answer is no. X will not be criminally liable because his age difference with Y is not more than 3 years. In the problem, the age difference between them is exactly 3 years at the time the sexual intercourse happened. Example number 4. X, 17 years old, and acting with discernment, forced Y, 15 years of age, to have sexual intercourse with him. Question, is X liable for statutory rape? The answer is yes. While it is true that their age difference is not more than 3 years, the sexual intercourse was not consensual. Why? Because X used force to make Y submit to his will. Example number 5. X, 16 years old, acting with discernment, threatened, intimidated, and coerced Y, 14 years of age, to have sex with him. As a result, X had carnal knowledge of Y. Question, is X liable? The answer is yes. While it is true that their age difference is not more than 3 years, the sexual activity was abusive because X, in this example, threatened, intimidated, and coerced Y. Take note that it is considered abusive if there is undue influence, intimidation, fraudulent machination, coercion, threat, physical, sexual, psychological, or mental injury or maltreatment, either with intention or through neglect, during the conduct of sexual activities with the child victim. Don't forget that. Example number 6. X, 16 years old and acting with discernment, enticed Y, 15 years old, to watch pornography and thereafter induced her to have sex with him. Question, is X liable? The answer is yes. While it is true that their age difference is not more than 3 years, the sexual intercourse was nevertheless abusive because X here, in this example, unduly influenced Y. Example number 7. X and Y, both 16 years of age, are lovers. Z, X's 99% identical twin brother, pretended to be X, and by that ploy, he was able to have carnal knowledge of Y. Is Z liable? The answer is yes. While it is true that their age difference is not more than 3 years, the sexual intercourse was abusive because the same was obtained through fraudulent machination. Example number 8. X, 17 years old, and Y, 15 years old, are lovers. X got so wild during his sexual intercourse with Y that as a result, the latter sustained bruises on her body and a serious injury on her genitals. Question, is X liable for statutory rape? The answer is yes. While it is true that their age difference is not more than 3 years, the sexual intercourse was abusive because X caused some physical and sexual injury upon Y during their sexual activity. And this is so even if the injury caused was not intentional. Take note of that. Example number 9. X, 16 years old, repeatedly slapped and called Y names during their sexual intercourse. Question, is X liable? The answer is yes. While it is true that their age difference is not more than 3 years, the sexual intercourse was nonetheless abusive because of the physical and verbal maltreatment suffered by Y during their sexual activity or sexual intercourse. Example number 10. X is 17 years old and Y is 15 years of age. Y is employed as a maid in X's house. Every time X's parents would be out of the house, X would invite Y inside his room and tell her that she would get an increase in her salary if they would have sex. X eventually succeeded in having carnal knowledge of Y. Question, is X liable for statutory rape? The answer is yes. While it is true that their age difference is not more than 3 years, the sexual activity was exploitative because X took advantage of Y's vulnerability and trust in order to achieve his carnal desire. Number 3. However, the exception in number 2 shall not apply if the victim is under 13 years of age at the time of the sexual intercourse. In other words, even if the age gap between the offender and the victim is not more than 3 years, and even if the sexual activity is consensual, non-abusive, and non-exploitative, the act will still be considered as statutory rape. Example number 1. Y, a girl aged 12 years old, invited her boyfriend X, 14 years of age, to her room and there they had sexual intercourse. Question, can X be made liable for the crime of statutory rape? The answer is no. Why? Because X is exempted from criminal liability pursuant to Section 6 of Republic Act 9344 as amended. X here is still clearly below the age of criminal responsibility. Example number 2. X, 15 years and 1 day old, and Y, 12 years and 8 months old, are childhood sweethearts who found themselves having sexual intercourse. Assuming X acted with discernment, the sexual act was consensual, non-abusive, and non-exploitative. Given this set of circumstances, can X be made liable for statutory rape? The answer is yes. The crime is statutory rape because Y is under 13 years of age at the time of the sexual intercourse. The exception mentioned in number 2 of this slide does not apply.